hour your clock strikes here, it's always Halloween. And I'm always your haunted host, Luce Tomlin Brenner. Welcome to Small Frights Friday. Each week, I like to share a curated selection of calls from the All Hallows Hotline and letters from the EEEEK mailbag. This episode is sponsored by Luceo Lantern Boxcar. Thanks so much for supporting the podcast Boxcar and always calling in with such fun contributions. You actually called in specifically to tell me I don't have to thank you, but I'm doing it because you're great. And listener, if you want to be great like Boxcar, you can sponsor the podcast with a one-time donation of $30 or more. I set up a Square account. How official is that? So I have that link at the bottom in the show notes and on Instagram as well. And I am also including PayPal because I believe that Square is not international. Who knew how difficult it was to accept payments internationally? I am a performer, not a businesswoman, so this is all news to me. So I have a Square link and a PayPal link. If you want to sponsor an episode or make a donation of any kind, a one-time donation, it helps the podcast so much. And I will give you a little shout out as well. And if you love It's Always Halloween and you want more It's Always Halloween, if you want it to always, always, always be Halloween, then you can join us for movie nights, ghost stories, and more by subscribing at patreon.com/It's Always Halloween. Our next movie night is coming up on Sunday, March 28th at 5 p.m. We will be watching and discussing an Irish horror movie in honor of St. Patrick's Day. And if you join now, we're going to be doing a poll this next week deciding which one we're going to watch. So you can join in on the poll. You can vote for what movie we're going to watch on Sunday, March 28th. So thank you so much to the whole Patreon Ghoul Gang. An extra special thank you again to Boxcar for sponsoring this episode. He's bringing it to you. And you know what? He also shared a really fun little Halloween story. So let's open today's episode with his call.
Good morning, Luce. Again, love the podcast. Appreciate you. Again, it keeps us company out here and keeps us rolling. And you had asked before if, sorry about that. You'd asked before if I was a truck driver, and that's exactly what I am, long haul driver. But anyways, I just left a thank you via Venmo. I'm not real versed with Venmo, so I don't know if it shows my name or whatnot, but I know you like to say thank you when you do recordings and whatnot. That's not necessary, although appreciated. But if you want to make a reference to it to try and encourage others to give thanks, that's fine. Just do me a favor and don't use my real name. Just you can call me Boxcar. How's that? That's what they call me on the radio. So anyways, keep up the great work. I really appreciate it. Also, quick little story. One of my most memorable Halloweens, I don't remember what I was dressed up as, to be honest with you, but there was a kind of a creepy bully guy that lived on our little dead-end street, and he was dressed up as Frankenstein. I'll never forget that. By the way, if you haven't started reading that series, that's a great book by Dean Koontz. But yeah, he was dressed up as Frankenstein, and he had bumped into me somewhere along the trick-or-treating route and scared the crap out of me. It was a pretty realistic-looking mask or something. But it scared me, and I remember going home, and I made a pretty big ruckus about it. I think I was like 5 or 6. And for some reason, I had to kind of a timeout type of thing. So they put me in this chair right by a big glass window, and while I was sitting there, I think I started crying at that point. And while I was sitting there crying in my timeout chair, that jerk came around and put his face right in the window, and I hadn't noticed it. He was just sitting there staring at me, and I looked out, and it just scared the crap out of me again. So I think I got into more trouble. But anyways, just a little funny story there. But thank you for everything you do. I appreciate you, and have a great evening.
Boxcar, I can't believe that Frankenstein got you twice. What a jerk he was. My goodness. You know, that story reminds me, this isn't a Halloween story, but it is a being scared story, so I hope that you appreciate it. When I was probably like 10, 11, 12, my best friend and I were like goofing around in my front yard, and my dad was in the backyard doing yard work, and we were like, oh, it'd be so funny to sneak up on him, give the old man a scare. And so we like crept around the side of the house that was kind of harder to get around. It was like very close to our neighbors on one side. And it was like not the way you usually use. It's like not the way you would walk to go to my backyard. More complicated. So we were like, let's squeeze around this way and he'll never know. And we were being so sneaky, we thought, as children. And we were like creeping around the corner. We were looking. We were being real quiet. And then my dad popped out and scared the crap out of us. He got the jump on us. And I'll never forget, it's so clear in my head, he like jumped out with like both feet, like, and his hands up and his big face. It was just like, ah! And it scared us both. We both like screamed and ran. And it was so funny. He's such a trickster, definitely where my sense of humor comes from. And we were like, oh man, we gotta get him back. So then we were like, okay, we'll go around the other side. So we went to go sneak around the other side, and he got us again. So he had us twice. And it was really scary both times. And then I never tried to sneak up on my dad again. Maybe that was the lesson. But there is just nothing like being scared by the same thing twice. It makes you feel like a dummy. Like you're just completely unaware of your surroundings. And I think it's so interesting, Boxcar, that it was like this Frankenstein mask that you can see so clearly now. And you love this Frankenstein series. So I'm wondering how much you kind of internalized that early experience with the Frankenstein mask is like, this is a scary image, a scary icon. And then maybe you sought Frankenstein out in other ways. I have not gotten to the series yet, but I did recently post about it on Instagram, and it is on my list. I have not read more than one book in like the last 6 months. I read before bed usually, and I have been just getting through maybe one page and then falling asleep immediately. The pandemic fatigue has made it so that not only do I feel tired and worn out every day, but then at night, even though I'm just at my desk all day, every day, at night, it's like I've run a marathon and I can't possibly keep my eyes open past midnight. So I read one page of a book and then I fall asleep with my face inside of the book, and then the little bookends are just cradling my face until I wake up at like 3 a.m, like, and the book pages are all wrinkled around me. So all that to say, Frankenstein will get here eventually. Thank you so much again, Boxcar, for supporting the podcast, for your really great anecdotes. We are going to be moving on to our first EEEEKmail of the day. The subject line is The Case of the Stolen Pumpkins. Every year, my parents would take my 2 siblings and I to the pumpkin patch to get a dozen big pumpkins, 4 for each of us. We went early in the year when there were still plenty of big ones. We'd take them home and paint faces on the outside of them, white ghosts, green monsters, brown werewolves, whatever we wanted. During the month of October, we would wash the paint off 3 each week and carve them so that we would have the warm glow of the jack-o'-lanterns all October. After a week, they'd be moldy and have to be discarded by smashing them in the woods and watching them go splat. The painted pumpkins would sit outside in front of our house till it was time to carve them. Well, one morning in mid-October, I came out for the school bus, and half of them had been stolen. It felt so unfair. My parents said they'd buy new ones, but it was the principle of the thing. At the pumpkin patch, there was a tree with fake bloody hands hanging from it labeled "Attempted Pumpkin Thieves." But here in my neighborhood, someone was just going to get away with this? I was angry for days. But then, as I was riding my bike in the neighborhood, I saw them. 4 painted pumpkins. I'd recognize them anywhere. The idea of getting my parents didn't even cross my mind. I jumped off my bike and ran up to the door and knocked. A woman answered, and I told her, "These 4 pumpkins have been stolen from my house." I think she was already kind of suspicious about the pumpkins because she did not question me at all. She yelled for her sons, and they came out and were scolded. Then she told them to carry the pumpkins back to my house and to apologize to my family. I walked my bike, and they carried their 2 pumpkins each as we walked down the road. I scowled at them in silence for a while, but they weren't angry back. They looked sad. I blurted out, "Why? Why did you steal my pumpkins?" And they said, "Because we didn't have any." And I returned, "Well, just ask your mom to buy you some." And then they told me that when they asked for pumpkins, their mom said pumpkins were too expensive. This confused me. I hadn't thought pumpkins were expensive at all. When we got to my house, they put the pumpkins down, and I just wanted them to leave. They didn't seem to mind getting out of the apology their mom told them to make, and they did just go. I caught the thieves, I got my pumpkins back, but for some reason, I was left feeling guilty. I went inside and told my parents I got the pumpkins back. They were surprised that I wasn't happy about it. I told them the details, and they helped me figure out what I didn't understand. This is when I learned that all families don't make the same amount of money. As a young child, this was news to me. Then I understood that for some people, pumpkins really were too expensive. When my pumpkins were stolen, it felt unfair. But now it felt equally unfair that these kids seemed to have the very essence of Halloween stolen from them. I asked my dad if we could still go to the pumpkin patch that weekend, but instead buy pumpkins for these kids since we no longer needed them. My parents complimented me for being generous, but it just felt fair. Everyone should get to carve pumpkins for Halloween. And I was around 5 years old, so it was easy for me to throw around my parents' money. Plus, I did get that second trip to the pumpkin patch, which had additional fun things like a corn maze and fresh cider. Maybe if generosity always came with fresh cider, more people would do it. Happy Halloween, Luce, because it's always Halloween. Becky. Becky, what an incredible story about learning class issues. I think that is such an important thing to discuss, to teach children, and to just keep in mind as we celebrate Halloween. I've had private chats with some people over email about DIY costumes versus like big fancy, costumes. And I think that an element of homemadeness is really important and really nice. I think with social media, it's really easy to get caught up in whoever can spend the most money. If you can get the $300 12-foot skeleton, then heck, you're gonna have the coolest, best social media Halloween page. But many of us, including your dear host, cannot blow $300 on a decoration. So automatically it feels like the ways you decorate for Halloween are inferior, or again, could even be stressful because you love Halloween, but you can't show it materially as much as maybe someone else can. And I think that those pressures are a nightmare and that we should all free ourselves from them, because much like Christmas, the spirit of Halloween is not about how much money you have to spend on yourself or on others, but is about having a good time, enjoying oneself, honoring our past, our present, creating a memorable experience for kids. None of that has to cost a ton of money. And I think that it's important if you live in a neighborhood or you are part of a community to figure out which kids in your neighborhood can't get pumpkins, which can't get costumes, who can't get decor. What are local homeless shelters and domestic violence shelters doing to provide Halloween for kids? How can you get involved? How can you help kids have the Halloween that you loved as a kid, or the Halloween that you wish you could have had as a kid, or the Halloween that you think every kid deserves? How can you make a difference? I'm sure many of us can afford to get some pumpkins for somebody who can't have them. And, Becky, I agree with you that maybe, people are more likely to do things when they get something out of it. And I just want to challenge that and say that I think what you can get out of giving pumpkins or a nice Halloween experience or literally anything that you give to another person in need is a good feeling. You get back a good feeling for doing something nice for somebody who appreciates it. And I think that it really helps us get out of our heads when we are in such an internalized spot, like in this pandemic, that if we're able to focus on what we can do for another person, then we're not just like stuck in our own limited experience of feeling lonely. So that's another reason to give back. I just want to note a really cool organization that helps kids get Halloween costumes who usually cannot afford them. So it's called Ween Dream. Okay, weendream.org. And I'm going to link to this in the show notes, but they get Halloween costumes. They collect them from all over the country and they send them all over the country. So there's a whole list of what they're looking for: new or gently used complete costumes, new unused wigs, tutus, wings, wands, capes, masks, superhero props. It goes on and on. They have a whole list of stuff that they're looking for and the requests that they get from families in need. And there's also a whole application section. If you are somebody who is looking for a costume for Halloween, then you can get hooked up with them to get the costumes for your kids that you need to give them the Halloween that they would love to have. So I'm going to be looking at some other organizations and see what other orgs might do something similar to this. And if you know about any, please call or write in about them. This will be in the show notes, and I will periodically post about them as we get closer to Halloween. I think it would be really cool if maybe we could do a little costume drive or something all together, kind of support each other and getting some costumes to kids in need. So thank you so much, Becky, for writing in with this really sweet story. And I think it is really great that even as a 5-year-old, you were like, yes, every kid deserves pumpkins, because that's true. Every kid does deserve pumpkins. Pumpkins, food, shelter, safety. Let's work to make sure we can get kids all of those things. All right, let's get into our next call from the All Hallows Hotline.
Hi, Luce. It's Marissa at Grotesque Ego on Twitter and Grotesque Ego Media on Instagram. You asked how to pronounce Adora Horrible, and it's pronounced Adora Horrible. And I also wanted to call in to recommend Lovecraft Country. It's an HBO series. I believe it's based on a book, but I haven't read the book. But it's a great show about the Black experience in America combined with elements of horror to then sort of further exaggerate and give meaning to what the characters on the show are experiencing. Can't recommend it enough. Think it's fantastic. But I also recommend listening to the companion piece podcast, Lovecraft Country Radio, after each episode. 2 Black women, one who is a writer on the show, go into depth to discuss the details of both the racial queries that the show brings up, as well as just the emotions and various horror elements. So I wanted to recommend that to everybody if they haven't watched that already. It's fantastic, it's entertaining, and I feel like it's an important show for our cultural time. Anyways, I hope you have an adorable day. Bye.
Marissa, thank you so much for calling in and correcting me / helping me understand it's pronounced adorahorrible. That is a lovely word. I am now shoehorning it into the rest of my vocabulary, and I encourage all the other lanterns to do so as well. And thank you for that recommendation for Lovecraft Country. So Marissa actually followed up with an email because she wanted to make a correction. So I'm just going to read part of that to you guys now. Marissa says, I left a voicemail, but because of my own nerves about speaking under pressure, I totally misspoke at one point and I wanted to correct myself. I was talking about the HBO horror drama Lovecraft Country and recommending it to everyone, which, again, it's an incredible show about the Black experience in America. But I used the word, quote, exaggerate at one point, and it's totally not the right word for what I meant. What I meant to say was that the show uses horror to heighten the real horrors of racism in America. Marissa, I think that is such a great point. I just adore Lovecraft Country. I think it is a fantastic show. I haven't finished watching it yet, but I think that you nailed it. They do such a great job heightening it to these monstrous proportions that actually really reflects the kind of monstrosity that Black people do have to deal with when it comes to racism in America. And you were right. It is based on a book, a really fantastic book that I think all of the Lanterns would be interested in reading. So I'm going to add Lovecraft Country by Matt Ruff, like a dog, RFF Ruff. It's a 2016 dark fantasy horror novel, and it's pretty similar to the show. I would have to go back and read it again because I haven't read it since it came out. I actually can't really pinpoint a lot of the differences, but I loved the book and I loved the show, but I did not know about the podcast. I love hearing writers talk about how their process and how something goes from the page to the screen. So that sounds just up my alley, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners will enjoy it as well. So check out the show notes for a link to the book Lovecraft Country, the TV show on HBO, and the podcast as well. And I also want to add that Marissa is an incredible makeup artist, and I'm going to put her Instagram in there as well so that you guys can check out. She does such really stunning cosplay when it comes to makeup and hair and looks of all your favorite sci-fi and horror characters. I think you guys will enjoy her account quite a bit. She is, as she might say, adorahorrible. So cute, so fun. Thank you, Marissa. All right, our next call is from the lovely Jenny, and I think that we are making a friendship connection in real time here on the show. Take it away, Jenny.
Hi, Luce, and hi, Luceo Lanterns. It's Jenny calling. I have a few things to talk about. Number one, I always forget to say this. If you haven't called the All Hallows Hotline, call it even if you don't have a message, because Luce's outgoing message is so wonderful. So that's number one. Call the All Hallows Hotline. Number two, Marco, who called on this last Friday episode, Small Frights, you are amazing, and I love you, and I want to be best friends. Your Halloween story about getting away with your boyfriend and your dog and your friends and making pumpkin chili and having a bonfire, it just all sounded amazing, and I love your energy, and I want to be friends. So I love the Small Frights episodes because I love hearing from everyone, and I just think it's such a fun Halloween community that you're creating, Luce, so thank you for that. I highly recommend anybody who thought about joining the Patreon, if you can, to join. I'm in the Ghoul Gang at the $10 level, and I have so much fun at the movie night. I told Luce after this last one that it's just been such a nice treat, a nice space for me during this weird time that we're in, especially, I think, of feeling kind of disconnected from people and not spending as much time with friends and stuff, it's nice to have this virtual community of Halloween lovers all over the country and the world, and it's really fun to have those movie nights a couple times a month. So if you've been thinking about it, this is your plug to join. And then finally, I wanted to recommend an author for, I don't know if it's horror or maybe more like psychological mystery drama, but Ruth Ware is one of my favorite writers. She has several books that are all in the same vein, but my favorite of hers is called In a Dark, Dark Wood. So I recommend Ruth Ware for the Lanterns Who Love reading. So that's all. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.
Jenny, thank you for that lovely gushing phone call. And everyone, I promise I did not twist her thumbs and make her call and plug everything. But it's very much appreciated, and it really means a lot to me that the movies twice a month are bringing you so much joy. This is such a difficult time to live through for myriad reasons, but the isolation is really making us bonkers, huh? It's so nice to be able to connect like this on Small Frights and hear these really great stories and recommendations from everybody. And then I really do, again, like Jenny, the movie nights are so fun because it's like 12 to 14 of us chatting about this film that we're watching, getting scared, getting goofy, sharing links and more stories. And it's been a really great experience. So I'm glad you're enjoying it, Jenny. And hey, don't take it from me, take it from Jenny, and sign up at the Patreon if you like, patreon.com/itsalwayshalloween. Mario and Jenny, are you guys going to be best friends? How can I help facilitate this friendship? Mario, reach out on Instagram at It's Always Halloween Podcast. Maybe we can get something going. Maybe we all should get away together next year in the Texas wine country. I didn't know Texas had a wine country. I've actually been thinking about putting together a Discord channel for patrons, so that could be another fun way for lanterns to connect with one another. When it's safe to travel again, there is just no end to things I want to do. I want to come to each of these communities you all keep telling me about. I want to do like a little event in Louisiana, a little event in New York, Sleepy Hollow, come down to Texas, go up to Seattle. Where should we have to start putting together a lanterns map so we can do fun little meetups throughout the country. And I'm so happy that you love the outgoing message. I was obsessed with the ads for 800 numbers as a kid. There was like the creep phone, and there was a call, like a Freddy hotline. You get for Freddy Krueger, which is absolutely out of this world, considering that Freddy Krueger, his backstory is that he is a pedophile. So it is very wild that they're like, children, ask your parents if you can call this ghost pedophile. But I always thought those commercials were so freaky, and I was like a kid, so I was also like, Freddy Krueger's real. So I was trying to capture that 80s, 90s horror movie Fright line vibe with my outgoing message. So I'm so happy that you guys appreciate it. And yes, again, listen to Jenny. She's very wise. Call the hotline. We want to hear your stories. You know what? If you have to listen and hang up, that's also fine, I guess. And Ruth Ware, great recommendation. I haven't read the book that you recommended, but I'm going to put a link to that one in the show notes. The Ruth Ware book that I've read is The Woman in Cabin 10, and I found it very tense the entire time. I was very stressed, and it was like a white knuckle in it. Didn't know what was going to happen to our lead character. She was in peril for almost the entire book. So I think those are great recommendations, Jenny. I really like mysteries a lot too. Gillian Flynn is one of my favorite authors, which I'm sure a little cliche. I'm sure you all have read her by now, but if not, obviously Gone Girl, but Dark Places is about the satanic panic, and I am obsessed with that one. And then, of course, they made Sharp Objects into an HBO miniseries a couple years ago. I know a lot of people weren't a fan of the miniseries. I thought it was a wonderful adaptation. If If you thought the miniseries was too slow, the book is much snappier, so I definitely recommend the book. And Gone Girl is an incredible book too. If you've only watched the movie, the book goes lots deeper into the idea of the cool girl, and it's great. So definitely we can expand our library into mysteries, because mysteries are quite spooky and chilling also. So 2 new book recs to add to our list this week: Lovecraft Country and In a Dark, Dark Wood. Reminds me of the Alvin Schwartz, the In a Dark, Dark Room anthology that The Green Ribbon came from. If listeners, you are joining us more recently, go back and listen to my episode on The Green Ribbon and the history of that story throughout the last few hundred years. It was quite disturbing the more I read about it. Listeners, what books disturb you? What stories can you not get out of your head? What TV shows and movies and Halloween scenes have you witnessed that you simply must share with us? Please call in with all your recommendations and memories and lovely experiences or experiences gone wrong. We want to hear about them. The number for the All Hallows Hotline is 802-532-DEAD. Or you can write me an EEEEKmail at itsalwayshalloweenpodcast@gmail.com. Those links are in the show notes. And as I said at the top of the episode, if you love It's Halloween, please, pretty please, subscribe at patreon.com/itsalwayshalloween or make a one-time donation. And those links are in the show notes. You can also support the podcast by buying It's Always Halloween merch on Redbubble. That link is there as well. And I am still shopping around. I got messages from a number of you saying that you would love a hand-printed It's Always Halloween t-shirt. So I am looking around. There's a couple of really cool independent screen printers here, trying to find one that aligns with my interests and goals here and get some prices for y'all. So keep your eyes on the Instagram. I'll bring it up on the episode, but hoping to get us some one-of-a-kind screen-printed shirts here before too long. This episode of It's Always Halloween was performed by me, Luce Tomlin Brenner, and with contributions from all of the incredible lanterns, Jenny, Marissa, Becky, and Boxcar, who sponsored the episode. Thanks so much, you guys, for making this episode great. The editing, theme music, and sound design is by Pete Burns. Thank you so much, Pete. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at LTB Comedy, Pete at Mittenberries, and the show at It's Always Halloween Podcast. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe and write us a little review so that like-minded ghouls can find us. We got a new one from Clown Can't Talk. Very scary name, thank you. The subject line is a spooky good find. Clown Can't Talk goes on to say, I found this podcast several weeks ago and I really enjoyed it. I've been listening ever since. At around 7 p.m., I get in my pajamas, I turn on the podcast, and I think it is a wonderful way to wind down after another frustrating day during COVID-19. Whew, you said it, Clown. This podcast is a must for any true lover of Halloween. It's currently 9:03 p.m. here in the San Francisco Bay Area. My lava lamp is on, and I'm in my pajamas listening to a show from December. It's terrific. Enjoy. I really loved that play-by-play. You painted a scene, and I'm feeling cozy as heck just reading your words. So thank you, Clown Can't Talk. And if you love the podcast, a free, easy thing you can do to help support us is to leave us a review, because it really gets Apple to pay attention and push us up so that other people can find it when they search the word Halloween. So you can also find us and all the other podcast apps, as well as the NPR One app, which is very cool. So thank you, everybody. This has been another episode of It's Always Halloween. Tune in next time, unless somebody steals your pumpkins and you got to chase them down and learn a whole lesson about class.